Welcome to our celebration of life for Joyce Eagle, known as Joy and by many other names, as you're going to hear as we continue with stories and pictures of her life. If you're joining us on the live stream, we are delighted to share this time with you. There's only a few of us here in the sanctuary, just immediate family. We have come today to celebrate Joy's life, to tell stories, to remember her as the very human person that she was, to talk about what we've learned from her and what we've gained from having had her in our life. And as I stand here saying these words, I'm thinking maybe we shouldn't have started with pictures. Pictures are hard to deal with. But let us gather today. Let us rejoice in her life. Let us give thanks to God for the time that we have had her, even as we have returned her to God. I'm going to call on my brother to do the opening prayer, and then my sister is going to read scripture.
Let us pray. God, we come into your presence on this day and we give you thanks for the life that each one of us has in which we can be together and comfort each other. But today especially, we give you thanks for Ms. E's life, for everything she's said and done and the way she has lived her life, for the way she has been a part of life, the way she has given life. We ask your Spirit will be with each and every one of us on this day and in the future. Amen.
The reading today is from John 1. Dear friends, let us love each other because love is from God, and everyone who loves is born from God and knows God. The person who doesn't love does not know God, because God is love. This is how the love of God is revealed to us. God has sent his only Son into the world so that we can live through him. This is love. It is not that we loved God, but that God loved us. Dear friends, if God loved us this way, we also ought to love each other. No one has ever seen God. If we love each other, God remains in us, and God's love is perfect in us. This is how we know we remain in God, and God remains in us, because God has given us a measure of the Spirit. We love because God first loved us.
Mom loved to sing. Unfortunately, we can't have a lot of hymns here today to sing in the sanctuary. But we can play a piece of music, one that she loved. She took some music lessons at one point, and even in church, when I was small, I could hear her hitting those high notes on the hymns. And so we're going to hear the Flower Duet. For the next few minutes, we're going to share some stories by members of the family. Some of those are going to be people standing here and sharing a story, and some are going to be on video. First, I'm going to call on my sister Lynn to come and share.
The first two passages I'm going to read are from two families that were especially close to Mom. They became part of our family and have been part of our family for many years. And Mom was Grandma Joy to them. When Mom turned 103, one of the children went to school and bragged that his grandma was the oldest person in the world. This was sent in by Heather and John McGillis. Joyce Eagle, or Grandma Joy, as she is known around our house, was one special lady who was always to the end young at heart. She was our favorite to say grace, as her prayers were so personal and yet appropriate for even the youngest at the table. Her stories and love of Muskoka made us feel the same, and as she reflected on something in her earlier life, we were immediately taken back there. She never complained and always greeted us with such a warm smile. Our children loved to see her and thought of her as their own grandmother for the past many years. We will miss her and wish to cherish the joy in her memory, along with extending our sympathy to the whole family. The second message that I'm going to be reading is from some friends that have known Mom for over 55 years. And again, they were part of our family. And this is from Rob and Sue Harshman, and Rob has written a story, and it's called The Story of a Remarkable Woman. We have known Grandma Joy for 55 years, and we have some great and unforgettable memories of her that have enriched our lives. One thing we'll always remember is that Grandma Joy was the ultimate storyteller. She loved to tell stories, and she loved to have an audience. There was the time when she had a small audience of children up at the cottage, and she talked about water boiling on the stove. In her unique way, she turned that simple event into a riveting, dramatic account that captivated everyone for 10 minutes. Or there was the time when a number of us did a group reading of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas on Christmas Eve. She insisted everyone read their parts with great drama and then act it out. Needless to say, we didn't all make the grade. Grandma Joy also loved drama. We remember the time she insisted the children act out being a slice of bacon cooking in a frying pan. They had to lie down on the floor and bounce around like hot bacon. But she also had a gift of writing and directing church pageants for Christmas and Easter with casts of over 50. At school, she organized and directed numerous dramas over the years. Whatever she did with great energy. When she walked into a room, she energized it and made sure she talked to everyone. She would encourage, laugh, and empathize with each person. And when Grandma Joy talked to you, it was as if you were the only one in the room. She focused on you and no one else. Whenever someone had a problem, she was always a good listener, who was willing to share some of her wisdom with you. I remember well the Sunday of Labor Day before I taught my first day of classes. Grandma Joy had some advice and insight that helped calm me down and launch me into my teaching career. Every day was a new adventure. We remember one hot summer day when she was in her 90s, and we were all eating ice cream cones in Bala. After her first bite, she declared, "This is the best ice cream cone I've ever had. It really is fantastic." Of course, she'd had hundreds of ice cream cones before, but each one she ate was the best she'd ever had. At times, she was a little eccentric. How well we remember New Year's Eve, 1971, up at the farm. The temperature outside was -30, and we had blowing snow, -30 Celsius, and we had blowing snow. But at the stroke of midnight, we had to open the front door and back door to let out the old new year and bring in the new year. And while the doors were open, we all banged pots and pans, for a reason we don't quite remember. That night, I slept out in a caboose on the edge of the escarpment and woke up with frost on my sleeping bag. In the morning, she engineered an enormous breakfast for everyone with pancakes, bacon, eggs, and much more. Grandma Joy was always inclusive. The moment you stepped into her house, you were part of her family, and she included you in everything that was going on. No one was to be left out. If someone arrived just before a meal, then she set another place at the table, and they ate their fill. She never skipped a beat. One weekend, we were up at the cottage, and there was a large crowd for dinner, and it was hot. I sat beside Reverend Eagle, who was carving the turkey. He had a great time as he cut the giant bird as the meat flew everywhere. Grandma Joy announced she was too hot, so she left the party, took off her caftan, and walked down the stairs to swim. After cooling off, she rejoined the party with her usual energy, making sure everyone had enough to eat. There was also a competitive side to Grandma Joy. Many rainy afternoons at her cottage, she'd organize card games for everyone who was there. She didn't exempt anyone, and then the games would begin. Grandma Joy was determined to have full participation, but she was equally determined to win. She'd take no hostages. Many years ago, when I was walking out of the manse with Grandma Joy, I turned to her in a whisper. I said, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you only have one earring." She laughed and responded, "Oh, don't worry. I lost the other one years ago. But they match this dress so well, I just wear one." I nodded, smiled, and walked out the door with her. Grandma Joy was also a woman of deep personal faith who held firmly to her belief in a loving God. When she prayed, we all knew she connected directly to the Almighty. Over the years, Grandma Joy extended kindness to many, many people, whether it was a next-door neighbor, a parishioner, a longtime friend, or someone she had just met. It might have been a meal she took over to someone who was ill, or an invitation to the cottage to someone who was lonely. She always had a heart of compassion for those in need. Looking back over the years, we see Grandma Joy as a friend to everyone, and someone who is always full of awe and wonder about the world around her. For 103 years, she never stopped demonstrating a love for her family and her friends. Her creativity and zest for life touched thousands, and our lives are richer for knowing it. Mom did love life. She enjoyed living every day. She enjoyed having people around her. She enjoyed adventures. She always had something to talk about with everyone. She enjoyed reading, learning, and writing. Each day was a novel experience for Mom. Mom made an impression on people by her gregarious nature, her fun-loving adventures, her ability to make people feel at home and comfortable, her creative story, and dramatic presentations. I hope at some time we will be able to collate the stories that she's written, and I know that Susan has already started some of those stories. Mom was a wonderful grandmother. Every one of the grandkids can verify that. Mom lived with us for a couple of years when Travis and Isaac were small. Whenever the boys were sent to bed, Mom would also go to bed. Did not Mom want to stay up and socialize with us? A little later, when everyone was settled, we would hear laughing and scuffling. Mom used to make mountains on the bed, and the boys loved the slide it created. Every night, stories were told, plays were enacted, and Mom became the guardian of magical moments moral upbringing, good manners, and happy times. To this day, Isaac carries Mama's pictures with him as he travels. Mom was very focused on providing Susan, Glenn, and I with the skills and the abilities to handle life's adventures. Our childhood experiences and parental teachings have influenced all of us. Whether it was taking us to the cottage with no phone, an outhouse, and water access only for 2 months each summer, or camping in a farmer's field in Nova Scotia for a full month, or learning the importance of education, or being PKs, all this did affect the decisions we made. Nothing was daunting or insurmountable for Mom. She always wanted to prove that things were possible. Her positive and fun-loving approach to problems always stood her in good stead or got her out of trouble. As Maya Angelou has written, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Mom made people feel cherished, happy, entertained, and loved. Mom, we love you and miss you.
We're now going to have 2 videos that we're going to see. One is from her granddaughter, Megan, and the second one is from her grandson, Isaac.
Hi, everyone. I'm not exactly sure what to say. Grandma Joy meant so much to me. You know, she taught me a lot. She taught me how to be positive about everything and look for the bright side in everything. She loved to have fun. She loved to laugh. And what I really loved is to do music with her. You know, remember when she would get out the wax paper and the combs, or the tambourine, or the stick and the bucket? She always could find a way to make music. And so I want to play this song for her. It's a sad song called Neil Gow's Lament, and it's about missing someone.
I have many memories of Mama. Mama lived with my brother Travis and I growing up. We were lucky enough to have a living grandmother for much of our childhood. There was never a dull moment with Mama. Each night we would play games and tell stories. Mama would light a campfire in her bedroom in the house. There weren't any real flames, of course. It was a flashlight with scrunched up tissue papers over top of it. Sometimes a fan even, to add to the effect. We would close the door, no parents allowed, just the three of us, and here we would play games, and Mama would tell us stories. There was a particular story which carried on for years, with characters such as Ghosty, Sharky, Bluey, and there were many more. Mama really brought these characters to life, almost as if they were in the room with us. Mama really had a wild imagination. She used to drive us around in Coro. Travis and I would argue about who would sit up front, and ultimately, Mama would tell us where we were sitting. I still remember this distinct smell getting into her little red car. It was a mix of old books, papers, and a variety of sun-hardened candies, and of course, the polyester seats. As Mama was, the games would continue in the car. She made a game of who could put on their seatbelt the fastest. She would drive donuts in parking lots, and always at red lights, she would count down to green. Every single time she said go, the light turned green. Travis and I thought it was magic. At that age, it did not occur to us that she was simply watching the opposite set of lights. Each summer, in the last week of August, Travis and I were sent over to Dark Bay to stay with Susan and Joe and Mama. Our parents had to prepare for the upcoming school year, and they pawned us off. It was a bittersweet week in August. We loved staying at the Eagle Cottage, as it was always full of adventure, but we also knew it was the end of summer. Mama would take us out in the rowboat or canoe to the beach for a picnic or go to the jumping rock at the end of the bay. We would walk over to the Church of the Kettles and swim there at the beach behind. At night, we would build a fire. Travis and I would build cardboard cities to burn down, and Mama would shake her head and laugh. She would tell us it was violent, but with her dramatic nature, I think she enjoyed the creative ways in which we would cause a catastrophe to these bustling cities nestled in the big stone fireplace. Susan and Joe were busy at the cottage. They had plenty of time for us, but obviously they had things to do, and they had their friends up there too. When they became busy working on a project, Mama would sneak us away on her boat, the Bayliner, whether she was whipping us in circles on the water tubes or bouncing us over waves in the bow, we would be holding on for dear life. While she sat coolly at the wheel with her sunglasses on and getting a big kick out of watching us bounce around. There would be a number of people and kids there throughout the week. Mama would, of course, have all the kids put on a play at the end of the week. To her dismay, these plays always ended with a giant fight scene. It rarely fit the plot of the play, but it happened nonetheless. To Susan's dismay, we would always use up all of her ketchup for fake blood. We all know Mama loved desserts and candy. She had a greater sweet tooth than anyone I've met before. I always got a kick out of her at dinner. Sorry, the seagull's got to chime in here. Mama always ate the bare minimum of her food and then claimed she was full. But as soon as dessert came out, she suddenly had quite the appetite. Every jacket, every purse, everywhere, she had candies or cookies. She even kept some under her pillows in her bed. And you could always tell when she had been snacking because she'd wear her glasses on the string down, and there were always crumbs sitting on her glasses. Mama could talk for hours. At every family event, Mama would always be surrounded by people. She would talk, and people always genuinely listened. Mama always had something interesting to say and would always capture the interest of others. She was charismatic, to say the least. No matter what, Mama's creative mind was running. Often I would tell Mama something, or some small, minuscule event would occur, and Mama would say, "Now there's an idea," followed by, "You could make that into a play," or "That's something a character in a story would say." Mama was constantly creating characters and stories in her mind. Maybe that's why she lived to 103. There was always one more chapter or one more scene to add. Mama loved a thrill. When Travis and I were young, she would sit us in her lap and tell us a rhyme. It was Rockabye Baby. And when it reached the part of the cradle falling, she would let go of us, and we would slide down her nightgown and tumble to the floor. Years later, we repaid her this thrill. At first, it was her walker that she would sit in, and we would run with it as fast as we could. And then years later, we upgraded to a wheelchair that we would run with her, and we could run a lot faster with that. She always shouted with excitement and never ever told us to slow down. For Mama, every moment was worth living. And in memory of Mama, of course, I brought candies down here to have. So here's some candies for Mama.
And now we're going to hear from another grandson, Travis, who's here with us today.
So basically everything Isaac said was something I was going to say, but I decided to talk about kind of my later memories. Although I have many great memories of Mama from when I was little, my favorite memories came later when she moved in with Susan and Joe at their house in Barrie. I would get to spend a lot of time with her there because it was just a short drive away. Sometimes Susan and Joe would have to leave for a day or two, and I would get to look after her, and it was these times where I got to just hang out with her as friends. We would spend the entire day just talking about life and watching our favorite TV shows. A big moment for our TV binging was when Susan and Joe got Mama a big screen smart TV for her room, which had Netflix and YouTube. You can imagine how this took things to the next level. I remember the time I showed her what YouTube was, where basically you could find any clip from any show from any time, and this included music. So hopefully this is the clip that'll play, but it's just a time where I basically said, is there any song that you could think of from your whole life that you want to listen to right now? And she said, the Easter Parade. And so, it's the other one.
No.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
They look us over, we'll be the proudest couple in the Easter parade on the avenue, Fifth Avenue. The photographers will snap us, and you find that you're in the photograph you're. I could write a sonnet about your Easter bonnet and of the guy I'm taking to the Easter parade. On the avenue, Fifth Avenue, the photographers will snap us, and you'll find that you're in the photograph you're.
I wish you'd known your grandfather. I wish he'd known you. He was a lot of fun.
So yeah, that was just like, I don't know. I love just like hanging out in her bedroom on her bed and just watching TV all day and just doing nothing really. Another video that I found when going through my Google Photos was one of her and Charlie. Charlie's our dog, and I don't know, they had such a cute relationship. I think it's both because they both love cookies I don't know. It's like the one person / creature that liked cookies as much as she did. Anyway, so here's a video of her feeding Charlie
You have
cookies.
a cookie now. Yes, you had a nice cookie. Would you like another cookie? There's a cookie for you. That's a nice cookie. Yes, because you're a nice doggy. I love you, darling. You're a nice doggy. I haven't got any more cookies. No cookies. No cookies. Not tonight. Another night. You get another cookie another night. Yeah.
See, he respected the food on her plate, which is, I think he's the only one he ever did that to. Anyway, so I'll just miss these moments with her and just having these afternoons of doing nothing. And yeah, just wanted to end with a poem I wrote about Mama. It just sums up everything that I thought about her. Kind of relates to a lot of what Isaac was saying. Her mind is an endless sky, a painting with no canvas. She shows you how to dream. Yeah.
Thank you, Travis. We're going to have 2 videos now, from Marcus, her grandson, and then from Tom, another grandson.
As I sit here sipping this Mogan David and reading a little Shakespeare, I'm reminded of how many ways that Mrs. E influenced my life. I recall being just a child at the cottage, making ice cream on the front veranda. And though that memory is a bit of a distant, hazy memory now, it actually would mark the beginning of like 40 consecutive years of memories and experiences at the cottage, and many of those with Mrs. E. She loved music, and I can still see her tapping her hand on the side of the rocking chair or her foot on the floor. And whenever I played my guitar, she would always be a willing audience member. She also loved theater, and she took a really keen interest in my grade 13 English project, which was a rendition of Shakespeare's Hamlet. And as a result, I ended up with a mark in the high 90s on that end of term assignment, and of course, quite possibly the only A+ I've ever received in my life, and thanks in part to those consultations and discussions with Mrs. E. Actually, you know, in terms of theater, actually, I was in my late 20s when I was called to the bar. Well, actually, more or less just cast as a law student in a young lawyer in one of Mrs. E's Christmas pageants, and it was a really amazing experience to see her directing and see her in that space of creativity, and it was such a pleasure to be in one of her productions. There's so many memories and experiences that I have and lessons I could speak of, but maybe the most important one for me is that Mrs. E really knew how to live life to the fullest. She loved life, and she knew how to have fun, and I love that about her. And even though she's moved on from this physical space, I feel like she'll always be here with me in the Mogan David, in the books I read, and you know, within the people and family and friends that I have.
Anyways, let me tell you a story about the Big Easy. that she shared with me a long time ago when she was just a young girl trying to get her driver's license. And it was in the era, imagine this, man. Imagine what Mrs. E's lived through, man. You know, they had a crank car. She came from horse and wagons to freaking internet to everything, man. Smart TVs, all that. She's seen the world and beyond, and she's managed to stay humble and beautiful and honest and happy. And we're all gonna miss her, but she's somehow feels like she's around me, just talking right now. Okay, guys, I love everyone, and hope to talk to everyone soon. Bye.
Mom loved her sons-in-law, and so I'm going to call on Brian Bell now to come and share some stories.
First, I'd like to read a message that was sent to us by Donnie Taps, Lynn, Brian, Travis, and Isaac. Joyce was an important adult in my life from my youth. As church leader, teacher, family friend, and mother-in-law, I admired her boundless energy and dramatic flair. She served as a role model for me in her capacity as minister's spouse. I observed her navigate the role successfully, and I attempted to follow her example when it was my turn. I benefited greatly from your mother's generosity and hospitality to me as a young person, and those experiences shaped me. As a grandmother to Megan and Daniel, Grandma Joy enriched their lives, and they have memories of her which will last a lifetime. With sympathy, Donnie. Lillian Joyce Eagle, my mother-in-law, was known by many names. Joyce, Joy, Lillian, Mrs. Eagle, Mrs. E, the Big Easy, Mother, Grandma Joy, and the one I know her best by, Mama. She earned the name Mama because she was grandmother to our two boys, Travis and Isaac. And what an absolutely fantastic mama to them she has been. When Travis first arrived, both Joyce and my mother, the two grandmothers, were there to welcome and greet him. However, within days, my mother, one of Travis's grandmothers, passed away. I'll always remember Joyce's words to me on learning of my mother's passing. Well, this means I will have to be grandmother for both of us. And grandmother for both of she has wonderfully been, not just for Travis, but also for Isaac, and has more than earned the beloved title of Mama, which she is best known by in our family. For the keeping of this promise made some 30 years ago or more, I give my thanks to her. For the last 30 years or more, Mama has been the warm and loving center of our two boys' life. No family celebration could be complete without Mama being there, from birthdays to Easter egg hunts, to all our Christmas Eves and mornings, to school events and graduations. No summer in Muskoka could be complete without sharing it with Mama. No vacation trips across North America or down to Florida could be complete without Mama coming along in the car. No bedtime complete without Mama there telling one of her many, many stories. Just as a side note, we did go down to Florida several times with Mama, and it really was an advantage when you went to Disney World, because even though she didn't require a chair, they would give her one, and that was great because that meant we could go right to the front of the line at all the events. So it was great having Mama down in Florida with us. She is the heart of Travis's and Isaac's love for her, and for being that is in Lynn's and my heart as well. Mama, you have more than kept your promise of being the boys' grandmother for both my mother and yourself, and for this, I truly thank you.
and Mom's other son-in-law, Joe Matthias.
Hello, everyone. Good day. We're here today to celebrate joy, and what a privilege that is. We connect to Lillian Joyce Eagle in various ways, as a mother, grandmother, friend, teacher, storyteller. But for most of us, she was the joyful one, so aptly called Joy by so many. She was truly one of the most positive, cheerful people in our lives. When you were feeling blue, downcast, overwhelmed, or even grouchy because you got up on the wrong side of the bed, there was nothing like being with the Big Easy, as my son Thomas called her, to start accentuating the positive. You could mellow out with her without smoking, imbibing, or ingesting anything. Justin Trudeau couldn't keep his sunny ways going for very long, but Joyce did it for more than 100 years. Around the time of her 100th birthday, I asked her how she was able to live so long and still be in such good spirits. It's the magic, she said, the magic of people. She was truly fascinated by people. She loved talking to almost anyone until she could discover what the person's interests, talents, and gifts were. That was how she engaged people, got them talking. She had an affection for oddballs and misfits, too. One of the first things I noticed about her in the early days of our relationship was how she was able to relate to almost anyone. She was one of those people who would notice the shy girl in the corner, the awkward guy on the edge of the group, and chat them up. She remembered things about people too, and would invariably recount a conversation with someone as a kind of vignette. She was a storyteller at heart. Even when she played solitaire, she would be making up a story as she drew cards. I sat with her once as she explained that the Queen was a rich girl who had just leased an apartment, the Ace, from a bitter, one-eyed guy named Jack, who was gay and also a two-timer. I don't know how that story ends. I can't remember, but it was pretty interesting. Her books were friends, and she would greet them when she came home. "Hello, books. Good to see you again." Needless to say, Joyce was not a rational, linear thinking person. She was creative. I wonder now if I could have some help, Bet, with that slide. No,
Dear Susan and Joe.
No, that's not the one. No. Okay. I guess you don't have it. I'll just talk about it then. At the cottage, and I wanted to show the picture of this wall in the cottage. That it was bare. It was the bare wall. It had writing on it, and I know, for example, that in the summer of 1955, there was no hydro, but they were getting along fine. Lynn was swimming like a duck. Susan was jumping off the end of the dock with no fear, and little Glenn was having fun splashing around in his pool on the dock. So, sorry, that's the image of you today, but we know you're much more than that. Anyway, she was creative. At the cottage, it was always 8 a.m., whether you got up at 9 or noon. She would change the clocks and let the day unfold on the new time. Joyce was a poor money manager, a trait that had to be reined in because she was a generous person. At Christmas time, she would compose a long list of people to whom she wanted to give presents. One year, the list had more than 100 names on it. "You can't do that," we told her. "You'll go bloat." Sadly, she let us help her pare the list back. If she liked someone, she would invite that person to come to our cottage. At one point, I think she invited most of the staff at Woods Park Care Center to come to the cottage. Again, we had to be the naysayers. Mrs. E., she, at one point in her life, she had an apartment in Toronto. She visited her sister Anna a lot in Guelph, Anna and her husband. She sometimes visited Glenn, stayed with Lynn and Brian and the boys, and came to our house. And she made a circuit. And at one time, I pointed this out to her, and she said, "I'm sleeping around, you know." She was known in the Kilworth, Delaware pastoral charge as Mrs. Spielberg. And that is because one of the first pageants she did there, she wanted to have a stage built, something like this, because the dais there was very small. Anyway, there were these three big guys, all over 6 feet tall, surrounding her, looking at her. Their jaws dropped, and one guy looked at her and said, "You don't know what you're asking us to do." And she said, "Yes, I do. I'm asking you to do a lot of work." They all looked at each other, and one guy said, "Okay, Mrs. Spielberg, you got it." And they did build something like this. That's pretty amazing. She was remarkably resilient. I recall one time when she was campaigning for Susan. She, of course, couldn't door knock, but she was doing this on the telephone at home. And one day she called a previous sign listing from the previous election and said, "You've taken sign for Susan in the past. Will you take one this time?" And the woman said, "No, I don't think we will." And she said, "Don't you like Susan?" And she said, "No, it's got nothing to do with that. I don't like signs." And the woman, Susan's mother said, "Well, why did you take one last time?" The woman said, "That wasn't me, that was my husband." And Susan's mom said, "Do you mean if I had your husband on the phone instead of you, there could be a sign on your lawn?" And the woman said, "Yes." And she said, "Is your husband there?" She said, "No, but he'll be home later. Do you mind if I call him?" The woman said, "It's a free country." So Susan's mother called back, got the guy, got a sign on the lawn. So that's what she was like. She was a great giver and receiver. Like when you gave her a gift, it was the most wonderful gift she had ever received. So the last gift was the most wonderful gift she had ever received, as Rob was explaining about ice cream cones. And it was like that. It was great to give things to her, and she loved to give gifts too. Another thing I remember about her is, and we all do, I've never met anyone in my life who could smile for a camera on cue like her. As soon as the camera was pointed at her, bam, the smile came out, white as a Cheshire cat, and it was usually a good picture. So I lived with her for 8 years in our house, And there were, and there was 40 years of knowing her, but in the last few years, she was in a different stage of life. So I have here some humorous incidents from her last years of life. When she was 97, we got a passport for her. The rules had changed, stretching the validation period from 5 years to 10 years. You could choose a 5-year term or a 10-year term and pay accordingly. We asked Mrs. E what option she wanted. 10 years, she said, of course. So we got her a 10-year passport, and actually, she lived another, 6 years? So it went over the 5 years. She was right. At Woods Park, there was an outdoor festival about a year or so ago, and they had an Elvis impersonator there. And we were outside, and this Elvis impersonator had very, very tight clothes on. And she looked at him and she said, "He's wearing his sister's pants. They're going to split, and I don't want to be here to see it." So at one point, she asked me, "How many people do you think there are in heaven?" I said, 144,000, giving her the Jehovah's Witness answer. She said, "That's not very many." I said, "How many do you think there are in heaven?" She said, "Millions." I liked her answer. About a year or so ago, we were visiting at Woods Park, and Mother said to Susan, "Are you happy?" Susan said, "Yes, I think I'm generally a happy person." And she said, "Even when you look in the mirror?" And in the last year or so, at one point, she started to think about, where things were going. And she said, "They leave me alone a lot because I'm not a big shit." In the past, before she lost a bit of her filters, it would have been a big bug, but she was right down there with us. So, and she also said to me, "I'd like to live another 90 years, but I'll take what I can get." January 2020. "Susan, you look sad. What's bothering you?" "Mother, I'm starting to think about getting old." "Susan, why now?" "Mother, because I'm an old toot, and soon they'll throw me under the bed. When I look around here, this place, I can see they're going to run out of beds." And recently, I think it was September, Susan said, "Why don't we sing the Joy song now?" Because she always sang that with her mother. She said, "I'll start it, and you can join in. Ready now? I'm going to sing now." Mother, God help us. So she had a sense of humor right up to the end. Now, a couple more things I want to say here is we always kibitzed about certain things. And one was food. And we always had a little joust about chicken balls, which I don't think are I don't consider to be a legitimate Chinese food, but we could not order Chinese without having chicken balls. And we went through this ritual. I would say, chicken balls are not Chinese food. They're deep fried, and I will show you how to eat a chicken ball. So I would take the chicken ball and break it and eat the chicken and throw the batter away. And she would just shake her head and said, "I can't understand why a person would leave the best part." And so if I had a chicken ball here right now, I would break it open, put the chicken ball aside, and I would eat that batter in honor of Mrs. E, but I don't have a chicken ball. So the last thing I want to do is I want to quote the poet laureate, the Nobel laureate, Bob Dylan. May God, I was going to sing this song today, but I never rehearsed it, so I'm just going to say a couple of verses. May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May your heart always be joyful. May your song always be sung. May you stay forever young. Thank you, Mrs. E, for that blessed life.
We have 2 audio tapes from Joe's sisters. Mom not only had her immediate family, Mom had extended family. And so we're going to hear first from Anne Matthias and then from Irene Matthias.
Dear Susan and Joe, I've been thinking about my personal relationship with Lillian Joyce Washington Eagle and the many one-on-one conversations we often had during quiet moments at family gatherings. Joyce loved to read, she loved to write, she loved to gift books to others. She loved to recount stories of her life and share her experiences. She recognized everyone's God-given talents, and most importantly, she spoke from the heart, knowing that no one is exempt from bad influences, messes, difficulties, and hardships. She was a go-to confidant who saw providence in it all. Our chats were never shallow or complicated, and often ended with epiphanies and insights about the meaning of something or next steps to take. These events bond you and are important moments in life. I've been trying to narrow down the biggest takeaway from the many meaningful conversations Joyce and I shared over the years. Here's a summary of a lesson from a conversation at Christmas of 2015. Every person's story is unique. The life you are living today is the current chapter in your story. Don't miss what's going on right in front of you. Celebrate the awesome of others. Live your own life bravely and own it. Embrace your incredible history and pursue your dreams. Lillian Joyce Washington Eagle embraced her own history and encouraged us all to hold the pen on our own lives. She walked with the wise, had faith in others, spread joy, and was the author of her own story. As she entered the gates of heaven, Lillian Joyce left behind a lasting legacy that will not be forgotten. I think that's why she lived to 103. Love, your sister, Anne Matthias.
Steve and I always enjoyed Mrs. E's company immensely, whether it was at Christmas or at the cottage or other family events. She was always a lot of fun, and her conversations were always so interesting. I know Steve and her like to talk books and their favorite authors, and her and I used to do just a lot of fun girl talk. Remember one time at the cottage, she just stepped out of the shower. I asked her if she would like me to do her hair. She thought that was a good idea. So I played hairdresser for a couple hours. We had a ball. We were just laughing and enjoying the afternoon. Oh, we have so many good memories with her. She'll be forever in our hearts for sure.
And from the Gendron side of the family, Colette, who is Joe's niece, also has something to share.
I just wanted to take a few seconds to talk about Mrs. E and how much she impacted everybody around her. I always appreciated her stories and how she made everybody feel, no matter if your problem was big or small or really non-existent at all. She made it seem like it was the only thing in the world that mattered, and she always cared. I enjoyed every moment of our laughs over the years, of all the memories we have. I'll be honest, I have never ever been invited to skinny dip before with an 85 or 6-year-old woman, but I'm very glad and honored that she chose me to ask me for. I will never forget that. There were so many things that we did over the years together, and I always really cherished the time we had together. After my last grandmother passed away, I was left with no grandparents, and I remember seeing Mrs. E shortly after that. And she just took my hand and reassured me that as long as she was still here, I'd always have one left, and I always cherished every single moment. It will not be the same without you, Mrs. E, but I will never be able to pass a bottle of Mogan David or anything purple and not think of you. I really appreciate all the time you took to care about my family, about me, and everybody around. I will never forget that lesson of it's not about the things that you have or what you don't have. It's about how you made someone feel. And you always took the time to make everybody feel great. I will miss you so much. Sending all my love. Goodbye, Mrs. C. Rest in peace.
We are getting to the end of the tributes and the memories and the stories. I have a passage to read that comes from Jackie Thompson and her sons Alex and Andrew. They wanted to share some memories today too. First of all, from Andrew, he writes, "There are so many great memories, so I'll try to keep it short. There was never a dull moment around Mrs. E. She was always eager to hear what's new and exciting in your life. If there wasn't something exciting in your life to you, she would always be there to encourage you to make something exciting in your life. Whether it would just be to play a card game or teach you a new one, or telling you stories from past experiences, and boy, did she have a lot. I never saw her as her age, as she was always ready to go off and do something fun. From rowing with us as we swam to a near beach to get us ready for the swim across to the point so that we didn't have to wear a life jacket in the boats, to taking us tubing while the adults worked on the cottage. She never stopped going and always she was doing. She encouraged everyone to be their best self and found a fun way about doing so, from telling you stories, doing plays on the said beach, and huge Christmas pageants that she helped Susan and Joe with. She was always that spark that needed to help with coming up with the spark you needed to help come up with an idea as well. She was the spark that told me I should teach wakeboarding, as she saw how much I loved water sports and how I enjoyed teaching the other kids to do so. Because of this spark, I opened and ran a summer business for 3 summers and got to do what I loved every day. I will cherish every memory and hope of joy in the life that she had." And then from Alex, "Mrs. E was so proud of us when we got up on water skis the first time. More important to us was her willingness to always take the boat out to pull us around. If the adults kept working when it was our afternoon playtime, she would simply slip away to tow us around on the lake. Evenings meant we got to stay up late with the adults, playing Mexican poker until midnight, adjusting our internal clocks from a skoke time, which often meant dinner after 9 o'clock. Every year she made a Thanksgiving toast and made us talk about ourselves, not my favorite thing to do. But it was a tradition. She made traditions special and meaningful. After the hubbub of Christmas was over, before the trees came down, we always gathered for a Christmas dinner with Mrs. E, Susan, and Joe. The gift exchange was a special part of those gatherings, with the most thoughtful gifts being exchanged. It was really nice to be a part of her 100th birthday celebration and see the many people who she impacted and see the pictures of her long and interesting life. I will miss Mrs. E and the traditions she made part of our lives." And then from their mother, Jackie, "I am not sure when it happened. Mrs. E has been a part of our lives for 30-some years, but there came a time when we became family. We could do a little archaeological type investigation and find the answer in the writing on the wall. Some of you may keep journals or diaries, but Mrs. E literally wrote on her bedroom walls. She recorded her Muskoka memories at the end of each summer at the cottage, and around the time she started to referring to me as another daughter, we became part of the history worthy enough for the wall. We could look at the dining room where she measured the heights of her children and their age, and then her grandchildren, of which mine got included. We could see how old they were when this transitioned from guests to family. For Andrew's 30th birthday, I gave him one of the best presents of his life. It was a copy of Emily Post's Book of Etiquette. It was infused with memories of sitting with Mrs. E as she instructed him on the appropriate social norms which he not only loved learning about, but which made him a fine young man. The week before school went back was always her favorite time with the kids. She would row over to the beach with Travis, Isaac, Alex, and Andrew for adventures, picnics, and gathering precious bits of nature to decorate the table for dinner. Somehow they convinced her that they were big enough to jump off the jumping rock and strong enough to try swimming across the lake. One by one, they did become strong enough for the confirming canoe trip with Susan. What astounds me now is that she was in her 70s when all this was going on. Her joy of life and family kept her young. We are not a thespian family, yet somehow we would all find ourselves on stage in the productions written and directed by Mrs. E. These Christmas events also meant we all got together more leading up to the holidays. Her exuberance with children was remarkable. From children's stories to vacation Bible school, she commanded their attention and awe. She was one of 2 people who ever convinced Alex to perform in front of an audience. His annual performances likely made it possible for him to give the best man speech for his best friend, who he maintained since kindergarten. She also served as a role model for me in raising my boys. Seeing the deep friendship she had with Susan was one of the greatest gifts of my life. I can proudly say that my children and now my daughter-in-law are my besties, exampled also by her respect and love for Joe. As I get a little older, even though I'm a decade away from the age that I met Mrs. E, I'm also benefiting from the example of care Susan and Joe modeled. When we first started spending time at the cottage, it was equipped only with an outhouse. As Mrs. E got a little older, things transitioned to make her time at the cottage more comfortable, even possible. The indoor plumbing, the pontoon boat, and the joyride are a few of the changes that kept her coming to the cottage until she was 102. Alex has been part of those projects, and we watched his skills develop each year. Last summer, Susan and Joe drove to Barrie to collect Mrs. E for an afternoon with us. We set up a picnic on the dock, and about an hour after her arrival, she grabbed my hand and said, "There you are, my daughter. Where are the boys?" Once she was with us, she didn't want to leave. Thanksgiving sleepovers at her farm also became an annual celebration that gave her immense joy to host. She loved having family all come together and often had us go around the table to share what we were thankful for each year. The last time we gathered with her, she shared that it would be her last time to host the dinner, but implored us to continue. We did last year, but this year COVID has stopped us from being together. We cannot gather today to celebrate her life, but we can pledge to each other that we can hold on to the memories and each other in the years ahead. And that's from Jackie. I'm going to say a few words. I think maybe a lot of what I want to share has been said by family and friends already, but there are a few things that I want to say, and bear with me if I do repeat some things, but Mom had that effect on everyone. There were so many people influenced and affected by her friendship and her love and her care. As was said, she was always interested in everyone she met. She always wanted to affirm people. We heard about the best ice cream cone, but it was always the best dinner. It was the best restaurant. It was the best everything. And she really meant it because she was living into the moment of that experience. She always talked to people about their interests and what was happening. She was always ready to go anywhere you wanted. She loved to travel and be with people. Even when she got quite elderly and came to live with us, She would get up every morning and say, "Well, what are we going to do today?" Unfortunately, too often we had work to do already that was already scheduled. But she never complained about it either, because she believed that her children were in education and in ministry, and that those things were important. And she'd grown up in a clergy family and understood that there weren't normal working hours or weekends off. She had joined the debating team at university, and she got to learn a lot about conversation, and sometimes she'd just state an opinion and then get everybody to weigh in, and before you knew it, a conversation was going. She had met Dad in university as part of the Gilbert and Sullivan musical that the university put on each year, and she figured everyone would just meet their future partner by getting involved in drama or music. She loved talking to children. Any event, a family gathering, a church event, I could always find her with a group of children or young people around her. She was asking them questions about themselves and getting them talking. She taught senior Sunday school in Sarnia. She ran the high school age youth group at St. James in Toronto. At her 100th birthday, we had many letters from high school English and particularly drama students talking about the difference that she made in their lives, affirming them, listening to them, encouraging them to follow their dreams. She was loyal to friendships and family. She always wanted to know if somebody was a relative, no matter how far extended that relationship was. And where they weren't family, she made them family. She adopted Jackie and family. She adopted Lynn's friends as family, Heather and John and Sue and Rob and many more. Every family member visiting was an occasion for a party. Out came the food and the china, and she literally bubbled over with enthusiasm. Friends were important. Her sister Anna, her childhood friend Helen Stewart, later Irene Dean. The two of them would spend hours chatting when Irene came to the farm, and Mom continued that friendship right up to the time that Irene moved out west and Mom moved into Woods Park. Her sister-in-law, Betty, Brian's sister, Barb, Joe's mother, June, all friends. And later when she needed help, Norla, Michelle, Bev, Evelyn, Robin, and Michaela over at Woods Park. She had another wonderful friend, Wason Choi. Mom and Wason met when they taught high school together in the 60s. They were two unconventional people, and together it only got worse. They had a wild sense of humor, and they egged each other on with their view of the world and funny stories that they would share. She was so excited when Wason got published. For years, she and Dad and Wason had season's tickets to the Royal Alex. And when Dad died, she and Wason just kept on going, right till Mom moved north with us. About 50 years of going to the theater together with season's tickets. When Mom and Wason got together, even if they hadn't seen each other for a few weeks, they just continued the conversation as if they had never stopped. I would hear the two of them giggling, thick as thieves. Through Wason, we learned about gender orientation and watched our parents, this was in the 60s, accept and affirm the friendship at a time when so many gay and lesbian people were nervous about coming out of the closet. Wason became another member of the family. I'm sure her love for Wason motivated Mom to sign the open letter in the 80s about dignity and recognition of gay and lesbian people in the church. When Wason died suddenly last year, I didn't have the heart to tell Mom. But somehow I think she knew. She mentioned him one day, and then she just looked at me. Mom was protective of family. She was a loving mother and grandmother. As a teacher, she refused to let other teachers come and complain about her kids. But somehow she knew about all the detentions that we got. I found a piece of paper that she wrote just a few years ago after she moved in with us. And this perhaps explains her attitude to being a mother and grandmother. She wrote, "I have the most wonderful family in the world. They are always there for me and ready to help. Lynn, Susan, Glenn. They all contribute to the world around them. Lynn with education, Susan and Glenn with the church, and all of them ready to help me, the girls especially with my day-to-day living. I am very blessed, and my dear grandchildren, love much. And to my sons-in-law for their help and understanding. They are always there for me. Thank God, love, Mother. Summer was a camp at the cottage. Traveling with Dad when he was a relief chaplain in the armed services took us camping while he stayed at the barracks. Day trips, excursions, campfires, cooking over the campfire. When we got a little bit older, Mom would take us on March break to New York, Quebec City, Montreal. Then she took her students to England while I was in university, but she signed me up as an assistant to help and chaperone, and off we went. She came with me to visit me in New Brunswick at my first summer pastoral charge. And then she traveled with me to my first ordained pastoral charge. Oh, and she loved that experience. We drove down to Cape Breton together, arriving fairly late in the evening. The welcome committee was sitting at the manse awaiting our arrival. This was my first pastoral charge as an ordained minister. They all came out and they greeted, yes, my mother. They welcomed her as their new minister. Oh, she loved that. I was in my early 20s and I looked like a teenager. So they, of course, assumed that Mom was their new minister. She enjoyed that confusion immensely. Mom really saw the world through a different lens. She was an artist and a romantic. Nothing was impossible if you could dream it. You could make it happen. Jo's told the story about her wanting a circular stage at Kilworth in Delaware and how she got the name of Mrs. Spielberg. As for the romantic, Dad was the love of her life. And even years after he died, she still spoke about him as if she'd just had a conversation with him. She loved to talk about the early years and their adventures on their first pastoral charge in northern Alberta. Mom loved people but was perfectly happy on her own. When she came into her apartment, she greeted all the furniture and the belongings as familiar friends. Her books were friends. She got them out and talked to them at times, reminiscing about when she'd read them or what had happened in her life at the time, or the gift from somebody. When she was alone, she was still surrounded by that love and those lovely things, and so she was never lonely. She woke up every day happy to be alive. She was creative and open to new ideas. As Jo mentioned, when we were kids, 8 o'clock in the morning started when we woke up, and it was that way every day. And sometimes it was quite late in the day by the time we were even getting to lunchtime, because she had reset the clock every single morning for 8 o'clock. She took us on boat trips. A small boat, and we went to secret place number 1, 2, 3, and 4. We thought everybody had a childhood like that. When she was older, she was not as active, and some afternoons she would play solitaire. And it was amazing to us to discover the story of how she interpreted and turned all those cards into living stories. Mom lived and breathed drama. As a child and young adult, and she was involved, and then it took her into teaching and developing theater arts, encouraging everyone to do plays. She was a benefactor of the first Stratford Festival, and so we still have a piece of the canvas tent that was sent to her when they moved from having a canvas cover and putting up the building in 1957. She wrote and directed plays, pageants, dialogues. She told me once that she couldn't think of any better way or anything more marvelous than to just die on stage acting to your heart's content. At the time, she was in her late 80s, and she was still leading the Vacation Bible Camp drama class and the Christmas pageant. After that, every time she got on stage, I started to worry about whether or not Mom was going to make this her final swan song. She loved gadgets. Any gadget would do, but she particularly loved Velcro. When she discovered Velcro, she knew that her inability to sew was no longer a problem. She just pasted Velcro on everything that needed to get fixed. She was at times annoyingly stubborn and persistent, like wanting that circular stage that would spin, or a scrim for changing scenes for plays and pageants, or defending her grandchildren whenever they got in trouble. She had a talent for encouraging her students. She loved the summer we spent living on a converted school bus, 8 of us, I think, all with bunk beds, traveling across the province for a couple of months as we were part of Prodigal Players, performing at different United churches every day. One big acting family, and she was in her element. She was an actor, poet, storyteller, and activist. You've heard about the stories for children and junior congregation and worship services and grandchildren, poetry that you would find in a birthday card. And as we've been packing up some of her things, I'm finding bits of poetry scribbled on loose pieces of paper all over the place. Just things that she wrote, her observations, sometimes silly comments about the world. After Dad died, she was at loose ends. She was still teaching, but after 5 years, she retired. And now what? She got active with Prodigal Players, as I mentioned, but also with the United Church structure, ending up chairing Toronto Presbytery, being elected a commissioner to General Council, chairing the Toronto Conference United Church in Society Committee, being the United Church rep on an Interfaith Racial Justice Committee in Toronto, and the Ecumenical Study Commission for Religious Education. She came out to protest. She organized postcard campaigns. She attended meetings with politicians. She helped to develop a refugee house and sat on the board of the Red Door program at Wood Green United Church. She was ours for a few precious years. One day, towards the end, she said to me, "I'm not sure if I'm a valuable citizen or just a hanger-on." She taught me that life is a gift and an adventure, that you need to find the fun. She taught me that nothing is impossible, that God's love and spirit surround us on all sides, in all people, and in all things. That loving people is one of the most important things that we can do, that we don't always have to follow the rules. The last couple of things that Mom said to me just before she died. She looked at me and she said, "Everything is okay." And then she said something that I wasn't really quite sure if I had heard correctly. But as I thought about it, I realized I had heard exactly what she said. For all the life she lived and the fun she had and the adventure she saw in life, she leaned over and she said to me, "Eternity, here I come." I hope Dad and God were ready for her. Some more pictures.
I did know Mother in some ways more out of the house than I did in the house, in the theater. So I called her Mrs. E up until just a few years ago. But just so you know, Joe, I have a picture of Mother, and it's the only picture we have that she's not smiling, because she was sitting, we were setting up a camera, and I asked her to hold up her finger, because she always would pose. So I asked her to hold up her finger so I could focus the camera, and she thought I was telling the truth. So that's the only picture we have of her not posing. This was her favorite song, she told me, because it was, it has joy in the last line, so I think she thought it was about her. But, and the shirt I have on today, just so you know, is the shirt from Prodigal Players. Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine, I'll taste your strawberries, I'll drink your sweet wine. Million tomorrows shall all pass away, ere I forget all the joy that is mine today. I'll be a dandy and I'll be a roser. You'll know who I am by the songs that I sing. I'll feast at your table, I'll sleep in your clover. Who cares what tomorrow may bring? I can't be contented with yesterday's glories. I can't live on promises, winter through spring. Today is my moment, and now is my story. I'll laugh and I'll cry and I'll sing. Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine, I'll taste your strawberries, I'll drink your sweet wine. Million tomorrows shall all pass away, ere I forget all the joy that is mine today.
Thank you, Glenn. Into the darkness and the warmth of the earth, we lay Joyce down. Into the freedom of the wind and the sunshine, we let Joyce go. Into the sadness and smiles of our memories, we commend her. Into the dance of the stars and the planets, we release Joy. Into the cycle of living and dying and rising again, Joy takes her place. Joy, may you rest in peace. We give thanks to God for this life among us. O Lord, support us all the day long of this troublous life, until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes, and the busy world is hushed and the fever of life is over, and our work is done. Then in your tender mercy grant us a safe lodging and a holy rest, and peace at the last through Jesus Christ. Amen.